my mother said with a completely straight face during our argument. My name is Amber, a 34-year-old food supply chain analyst living independently in Dallas, Texas. In my profession, I constantly identify risks to eliminate unnecessary financial leaks to keep operations running smoothly. Yet in my personal life, I had become the permanent funding source for relatives who viewed my income as their unquestionable entitlement. The argument escalated late that evening when my mother demanded I cover an outrageously expensive honeymoon package for my younger sister. When I pointed out the sheer absurdity of expecting me to finance a luxury vacation, my mother looked at me with absolute contempt. She delivered that vicious line about me being replaceable while my sister stood right beside her laughing under her breath. Instead of crying or defending my worth, I simply looked around the upscale apartment that I was paying for every single month. I thought about the vehicle lease under my name, along with the credit cards they swiped, without a second thought. I looked right back at them, stating clearly that if I could be replaced, then what I provide could also be cut off. They laughed out loud because they genuinely believed I was joking while assuming I lacked the courage to enforce a boundary. Before we get into the brutal reality check they received, tell me what time it is, along with where you are watching from today. I really want to know how far this story of family drama has traveled across the world. Make 32 angry missed calls the very next morning taught them a permanent lesson about financial boundaries. Right that night, when the heavy sound of their slamming door finally faded into the dark hallway, I sat alone in the middle of my living room and began dismantling this parasitic financial system. I immediately opened my laptop on the coffee table to apply the exact risk management strategies I utilize daily at my corporate logistics job. Tracking inventory losses and cutting wasteful leaks within a complex food supply chain requires absolute objectivity without any emotional interference from external vendors. I decided to treat my personal household expenses with that same ruthless corporate efficiency to identify exactly where my income was bleeding out every single month. A detailed analysis of my digital bank statements revealed the massive cash flow pouring directly into the luxury apartment occupied by my mother, Susan. The financial spreadsheets also highlighted the exorbitant monthly car insurance premiums I was covering for my younger sister, Morgan, along with the luxury vehicle installments for her fiancé, Tyler. Seeing their names attached to thousands of my hard-earned dollars sitting neatly in recurring expense columns shifted my perspective entirely. I realized I was solely funding a premium lifestyle for 3 capable adults that far exceeded what they could actually afford on their own, while they contributed absolutely nothing in return. I sat back in the quiet room while recalling the toxic psychological manipulation they utilized over the past few years to establish this highly unbalanced financial arrangement. Mom constantly weaponized the concept of blood ties and family loyalty to force my compliance whenever a new lease or loan required a qualified guarantor. She systematically conditioned me to obediently sign those binding financial documents without daring to question the long-term consequences or my own future stability. They systematically built a comfortable reality, relying entirely on my deep fear of destroying our family bond through any kind of financial refusal. Operating with an incredible sense of calmness, instead of the usual anxiety, I logged into my primary online banking portal to initiate the first wave of administrative removals. I navigated straight to the credit card management dashboard, displaying the supplementary cards they treated as their personal unlimited funding sources for years. It took only a few deliberate clicks of my computer mouse to permanently lock every single card carrying their names across all my active accounts. Revoking their financial access required no lengthy debates or permission because the primary account holder always retains the ultimate legal authority over the entire credit line. I then turned my full attention to the joint checking account that I originally opened for household emergencies, but which they regularly treated as a daily slush fund for unnecessary purchases. I initiated a direct electronic transfer to drain the entire savings balance down to zero before they could possibly notice the upcoming changes. That money moved instantly into a brand new personal account protected by strict two-factor authentication protocols that none of them could ever bypass or manipulate. Securing my hard-earned assets felt exactly like patching a massive hole in a sinking commercial ship before the rushing water could finally pull it completely under. Not a single tear fell from my eyes, nor did any feeling of guilt or torment cloud my judgment during this completely necessary process. I only experienced absolute rationality taking complete control over my mind as I systematically severed the financial pipelines they had exploited for far too long. Every administrative action I took that quiet night solidified the boundaries I should have established years ago to protect my own professional livelihood and mental peace. I finally closed the laptop screen while feeling perfectly prepared to face the inevitable storm of panic that would surely arrive with the tomorrow morning light. At 9 o'clock the following morning, while I was busy reviewing freight reports at the office, my phone screen continuously flashed with 32 missed calls signaling the collapse. The first devastating consequence of my administrative boundary struck without warning when Mom attempted to purchase a massive cart full of premium groceries at a highly populated supermarket. The automated checkout system flatly rejected her supplementary card right in front of the curious and judgmental eyes of dozens of impatient customers waiting in the checkout line. Experiencing a public financial humiliation over a declined transaction was a completely foreign concept to a woman who spent years utilizing my flawless credit history to fund her comfortable daily existence. She desperately swiped the plastic a second time while loudly blaming the cashier for the machine malfunction, only to receive the exact same loud error beep echoing through the crowded store. Almost simultaneously on the other side of town, Morgan encountered an equally embarrassing public situation while hopelessly stranded beside the fuel pumps at a premium gas station. She confidently requested the attendant to completely fill up the tank of her luxury vehicle before casually handing over the secondary credit card that I had deactivated the night before. The merchant terminal instantly displayed a permanent restriction notice, leaving her completely stuck, without any alternative method to pay for the expensive premium fuel already pumped into her vehicle. Panic quickly set in as the station manager stepped outside demanding immediate payment, while sternly threatening to call the local authorities over the invalid payment method. She frantically searched her designer handbag for emergency cash, but found absolutely nothing because she always relied on my invisible financial safety net to cover her tracks. My digital voicemail inbox quickly flooded with a barrage of frantic audio messages capturing their escalating hysteria in real time as reality finally began to set in. Mom left a particularly vicious recording filled with background grocery store noise while screaming directly into the mobile receiver, "The bank is experiencing a massive system error, so you need to call them to reopen my card immediately, you useless thing." She entirely assumed that a random technical glitch caused the embarrassing supermarket incident, rather than accepting the fact that her endless supply of free money had deliberately been terminated. Sitting safely at my desk, I felt absolutely no rush or anxiety, listening to her frantic demands echoing through the small speaker of my corporate mobile device. I calmly opened the family group chat to type out a single definitive text message. "The cards are permanently locked because that is the new financial rule for someone who is replaceable." Reading that unapologetic confirmation immediately shifted Morgan from a state of total confusion into aggressive and highly threatening hostility toward my newfound independence. Her digital typing indicator bubbled frantically on the glowing screen for several minutes before a massive block of text appeared filled with venomous accusations regarding my sudden lack of sibling loyalty. She fired off a final demanding message filled with manufactured outrage reading, "You are completely cold-blooded, so if you do not restore those cards right now, then never look at this family again." They clearly expected that delivering such a harsh, emotional ultimatum would instantly force me into a panicked submission and prompt an immediate restoration of their funding. Instead of engaging in a pointless digital shouting match with people who refuse to accept accountability, I simply activated the silent mode for their specific contact profiles. I placed the muted device face down on my wooden desk and smoothly transitioned my focus back to the complex supply chain data illuminating my computer monitor. 2 days later, I maximized my incredibly short corporate lunch break by driving out to permanently resolve the complicated legal bindings using clear, official paperwork. My very first destination was the upscale real estate leasing office, managing the luxury apartment building where Mom currently resided in absolute comfort. I walked directly up to the property manager standing behind the mahogany front desk to request the official physical forms required to unilaterally withdraw my signature. I needed to legally remove myself entirely from the role of the primary financial guarantor for her expensive residential unit before the next billing cycle began. The leasing agent initially hesitated while explaining that a tenant without a qualified guarantor or sufficient independent income would face immediate eviction proceedings within the state of Texas. I simply nodded in complete understanding while firmly sliding the signed withdrawal document back across the smooth desk surface without a single ounce of hesitation. The moment I sat back inside the comfortable driver's seat of my parked vehicle, I initiated a direct phone call to the national telecommunications provider to handle the next logistical step. I navigated patiently through the automated menu to reach a live customer service representative to completely separate their active phone numbers from my centralized family plan. The helpful agent warned me about early termination fees, but I interrupted the corporate script to clearly state my permanent intentions regarding the shared billing account. From this moment forward, they will have to pay for all of their own incurred charges, I declared while officially authorizing the immediate disconnection of their cellular devices. My next administrative target involved contacting the familiar auto insurance agency to address the massive liability risk parked in the driveway belonging to Morgan. I instructed the dedicated account representative to firmly and permanently strike Morgan along with her incredibly expensive sports car entirely from the comprehensive joint insurance policy. Executing this specific modification meant willingly sacrificing a substantial premium discount that previously kept my own monthly insurance rates relatively affordable over the past 3 years. The seasoned insurance agent sounded genuinely surprised by my sudden directive echoing through the phone line during a regular Tuesday business afternoon. He paused for a long moment while carefully reviewing the digital underwriting file on his monitor before asking a very direct question regarding my sudden modification request. Ms. Amber, are you absolutely sure you want to remove your relatives from the policy? Right now, the penalty fees will be quite high. Hearing his professional concern regarding the financial penalties did not sway my unwavering determination to finally cut off the parasitic supply chain, draining my bank accounts. I calmly replied over the secure cellular connection, I am absolutely certain with my decision. Please just follow the proper procedures and let all the risks belong to the exact person who created them. The agent typed rapidly on his mechanical keyboard to finalize the immediate removal of her luxury vehicle from my protective coverage umbrella, sending the confirmation email instantly. Stepping away from the role of the endless family ATM felt exactly like closing a massive operational vulnerability within a fragile corporate supply chain network. A few minutes later, a series of official digital cancellation receipts illuminated my smartphone screen, confirming the complete and irreversible termination of my long-standing financial sponsorships. Looking quietly at those definitive digital documents, I deeply realized that the incredibly harsh American credit system would finally take over my former role as the provider. The unforgiving economic market of the United States does not care about biological connections or emotional manipulation tactics utilized by toxic individuals seeking a free ride. The strict financial system would now step in on my behalf to teach them a highly necessary and incredibly well-deserved lesson about true adulthood and personal accountability. Later that afternoon, the internal security system of the logistics warehouse headquarters unexpectedly notified me that a middle-aged woman was causing a massive scene while screaming at the main entrance. The sudden appearance of Susan directly at my professional workplace was a calculated strategic move designed to generate intense public pressure against my recent financial decisions. She deliberately chose the busiest time of the day to ensure a large audience of my colleagues and security personnel would witness her theatrical performance. I watched her through the security monitor as she began her familiar dramatic routine by weeping loudly while portraying herself as a helpless and abandoned mother. She desperately attempted to smear my professional reputation by telling anyone who would listen that her cruel daughter had heartlessly stripped away her only means of survival. This blatant attempt at character assassination was intended to embarrass me into a submissive reconciliation right in the middle of the corporate lobby. I stepped out from the elevator into the wide marble lobby, maintaining an air of absolute professional detachment and a completely cold expression. My calm and collected demeanor created a stark contrast against her erratic and hysterical behavior in front of the growing crowd of onlookers. Susan immediately lunged toward me while grabbing onto my blazer sleeve and shrieking at the top of her lungs for the entire office to hear. "You cannot treat your own biological mother like this. You must reopen those credit cards immediately so I can keep my dignity with the neighbors." Her voice echoed through the high ceilings of the glass building as she tried to weaponize maternal guilt to force a public financial surrender. She truly believed that creating a scandalous scene would leave me with no choice but to restore her unlimited access to my hard-earned bank accounts. I firmly brushed her hand away from my clothing and responded with a steel voice that was loud enough for every nearby security guard to clearly hear my directive. "I have absolutely no legal or moral obligation to subsidize your financial delusions, so please leave this private property immediately before I authorize security to use force." The sheer authority in my tone caught her off guard as she realized her usual emotional manipulation tactics were failing to penetrate my professional boundaries. The surrounding staff watched in silence as the security team stepped forward to reinforce my demand for her to vacate the premises at once. A wave of overwhelming humiliation washed over her face when she finally understood that her manufactured tears held absolutely no power in this structured corporate environment. She was forced to lower her head in defeat while slowly walking toward the automatic glass doors as the security guards followed her closely to ensure her exit. Watching her figure disappear into the parking lot confirmed that she no longer had any leverage over my life or my career. By that weekend, as the financial silence began to tighten its grip around their throats, another filthy and dangerous vulnerability was suddenly dragged into the light of day. While I was reviewing my personal accounts on Saturday morning, I unexpectedly received a high-priority security notification from my legacy credit monitoring service. The automated email flagged multiple hard inquiries and unauthorized access attempts originating from the specific residential address currently associated with Morgan. These suspicious digital fingerprints suggested that someone was desperately trying to leverage her identity to secure high-interest debt without her explicit knowledge. Using the sharp, data-driven instincts of a professional analyst, I quickly began tracing the breadcrumbs through various predatory lending portals. Within less than an hour, I discovered that Tyler was stealthily utilizing the social security number of Morgan to apply for multiple high-interest payday loans online. He was clearly attempting to bridge their sudden massive income gap by committing identity fraud against his own fiancée behind her back. I immediately captured every single digital record and compiled a comprehensive package of screenshots as undeniable evidence of his criminal deception. This blatant betrayal was far more serious than a simple argument over credit card limits because it involved potential long-term legal and financial ruin for her. I decided to send all the evidence directly to the mobile phone of Morgan as my final act of sisterly duty to warn her about the parasite she intended to marry. A few minutes later, the device in my hand erupted with an incoming call from her that was characterized by absolute and unhinged fury. Instead of expressing any gratitude for the warning, she shrieked through the receiver with a voice that was dripping with venomous accusations. "You are such a jealous and miserable person that you actually sat there and photoshopped these lies just to smear the reputation of Tyler." She refused to even look at the timestamps or the official banking headers that proved the validity of the fraud reports I had provided. The depth of her psychological manipulation was so profound that she preferred to believe a fabricated conspiracy rather than accept the objective reality regarding her dishonest partner. I took a deep breath while leaning back in my office chair, feeling a profound sense of exhaustion at her refusal to acknowledge the truth staring her in the face. "The choice is entirely yours to make, but your incredible stupidity is no longer a risk that exists within my personal supply chain." "Oh," I responded with absolute finality. I realized then that she was not a victim of a misunderstanding, but rather a willing participant in her own destruction through a misplaced sense of loyalty. There was no longer any point in providing logic or evidence to someone who viewed my attempts at protection as a personal attack. Immediately after ending that toxic conversation, I took the final step of permanently blocking her phone number and all of her associated social media profiles. I finally let go of the emotional burden because I understood the bitter truth that you simply cannot save someone who is determined to drown while clutching a sinking stone. 1 month later, the brutal financial market of the United States officially delivered a series of realistic punishments to their doorsteps without a single exception or delay. Since the luxury apartment complex no longer had my verified income as a legal guarantee, Susan received an incredibly cold eviction notice taped directly to her front door. The management company refused to extend her lease because she lacked the necessary independent documentation to prove she could maintain the high monthly rent on her own. She was forced to spend her afternoons frantically packing up her cheap remaining belongings, while realizing that her days of living in an upscale Dallas neighborhood were officially over. With no other viable options available, she reluctantly moved into a dilapidated weekly rate motel situated deep within a high-crime area on the outskirts of the city. This sudden transition from a guarded community to a flickering neon sign above a stained carpet was the direct result of her refusal to value the person providing her stability. Simultaneously, during a freezing cold morning at 3 o'clock, the expensive sports car belonging to Morgan was mercilessly towed away by a specialized repossession crew from the finance company. Because she had missed multiple consecutive payments after my insurance and funding were cut, the bank moved swiftly to recover their depreciating asset from the dark driveway. The loud mechanical clanking of the tow truck chain served as a wake-up call for the entire neighborhood, as her primary status symbol was dragged away into the night. Just as I had predicted months ago, Tyler immediately revealed his true identity as a despicable and opportunistic parasite the moment the well ran dry. He abruptly canceled the engagement and cleared out his personal belongings to disappear into the shadows once he realized the family gold mine had been permanently closed. He had no intention of staying to rebuild a life with someone who no longer possessed a platinum credit line to fund his lazy lifestyle. A few days later, I happened to run into a mutual acquaintance at a local coffee shop who sighed deeply while sharing the latest news regarding their desperate situation. This person looked at me with a mix of pity and disbelief before recounting the absolute state of their current domestic affairs. "Your mother and sister are struggling so much that they cannot even open a basic internet account because their credit scores are completely destroyed," she whispered over her latte. Hearing about their total exclusion from modern conveniences did not stir any regret within me because I understood the mechanical nature of the American economy. I responded with a slight nod and a calm smile before stating my observation regarding the current reality of our situation. The capitalist system never lies to anyone because it is simply forcing them to pay the price for the years they spent parasitically living off my hard work. I replied while adjusting my coat. The dark financial history they created through years of negligence had finally transformed Susan and Morgan into invisible ghosts within the broader American economic structure. They were now legally and financially incapable of borrowing money or even signing a legitimate lease for a decent property anywhere in the country. Without a functional credit score or a reliable guarantor, they were effectively locked out of the very society they once navigated with such unearned arrogance. They had spent their lives believing the rules of responsibility did not apply to them because they were safely hidden behind my professional success and financial sacrifice. Now that the shield was gone, the cold reality of the market was treating them exactly like the high-risk liabilities they had always been. My life continued to move forward with peace and clarity, while they were left to navigate the wreckage of a burned-out supply chain that I refused to fund any longer. 6 months later, a completely coincidental encounter at the parking lot of a discount grocery store permanently closed this gloomy family chapter forever. As I stepped out of the store, I unexpectedly bumped into Susan and Morgan in a disheveled and haggard state that made them almost unrecognizable compared to the arrogant people they once were. Their clothes looked worn out, and their faces carried the heavy weight of financial struggle which stood in sharp contrast to the days when they carelessly squandered my hard-earned money. They appeared deeply embarrassed and awkward when attempting to start a conversation with me, while intentionally dropping subtle complaints about their current poverty. They were clearly hoping to trigger a small spark of pity within me, so that I might open my heart and allow them to return to the old parasitic lifestyle they missed so dearly. Susan looked at me with tearful eyes and a pleading expression while whispering in a weak and trembling voice that failed to move my resolve. Amber, blood ties cannot be severed like this because your mother and sister have been living such a difficult life lately, so please forgive us and help your family. I simply looked directly into her tired eyes without a single flicker of hesitation or emotional doubt clouding my professional judgment. I responded with a steel voice that cut through her manipulation. I am only a person who is replaceable, and you should never forget that you were the one who taught me that lesson. That razor-sharp statement left both of them frozen in place with shock, as they realized that their former emotional leverage had completely vanished. I calmly turned my back on them and walked straight to my vehicle before driving away forever without ever looking back in my rearview mirror. Before we conclude today's story, do not rush to click away, because the journey of Amber offers us some incredibly profound insights into the reality of modern family dynamics. This narrative serves as a stark reminder that filial piety is not a blank check or a lifetime subscription to fund the laziness and entitlement of others. When a family member treats you as a replaceable financial product, they forfeit the right to the security and resources you provide through your hard work. Establishing firm financial boundaries is not an act of cruelty. Rather, it is a vital act of self-preservation that forces irresponsible adults to finally face the consequences of their own choices. At the end of the day, a healthy relationship must be built on mutual respect and accountability, not on the parasitic extraction of wealth under the guise of blood loyalty. What would you have done if you were in the shoes of Amber after hearing such a cold statement from your own mother? Would you have the courage to cut the supply chain immediately, or would you try to negotiate one last time? If you have a different perspective or a unique way to handle such toxic family entitlement, please share your thoughts and personal stories in the comments below. I truly appreciate every single one of you for staying until the very end to listen to this realistic and difficult journey. Your insights help our community grow stronger, so let the discussion continue with clarity and respect.